Alright, in this tutorial, we're going to take a look at Photoshop CS2's new Smart Sharpen filter. We're going to see some interesting ways that we can use this to just selectively sharpen areas of our photos. Now the first thing that we'll do is I want to duplicate my background layer. And I'm not doing this to keep a copy of the background. You can make backup copies if you want to. I'm doing this because it gives me flexibility later on if I decide I only want to sharpen certain areas of my photo. So to duplicate the layer, just press Control or Command on the Mac and the letter J, and that creates a duplicate copy. Then I'm going to choose Filter, Sharpen, Smart Sharpen. Now, before we do anything in this filter, I'm going to show you a really cool trick here, and this works with a lot of filters in Photoshop. And that is, when you're working inside these filters and you want to see the before and the after photo, well, don't worry about having to move the dialog away if you want to see that background. Just put your cursor inside this filter preview area, hold down your mouse button, and that shows you the before photo. Now, if you pick the mouse button, you release the mouse button, that shows you the after. So that's just a nice quick way to show you the before and the after of what your filter settings will do to your photo. Alright, so now let's get into the settings here. First thing that we'll do, I'm going to leave it on basic. Basic will really do a lot for your photos, especially if you don't want to get bogged down in the sharpening process. You just want to quickly make your photos kind of pop off the screen a little bit more. Basic works just fine. Advanced is kind of a tutorial in and of itself, so we'll cover that one in another tutorial later on. Alright, so let's go down to the amount setting here. Amount, basically this is the amount or the strength of sharpening that's going to be applied to your photo. So what I usually do, I'll start it off at 50%. I'll see what it looks like. If I'm not happy, I'll bump it up in 25% increments to about 75. If I'm not happy with that, then I'll change it to 100. I think 100 looks pretty good here. It almost looks a little bit over sharpened in some areas, but I really like the way the hair looks and the dress and the flowers here, the clothing. So that's what I'm looking at for the most part here, and I like that. So I'm going to leave it at 100. The radius, you want to set that to anywhere between 1 pixel, maybe 2 pixels if it's really noticeably blurry, but look what happens when you just change that to 3 pixels. You can see I get that halo around. It almost looks like he's glowing, and that's not the effect we're looking for here. So 1 pixel works pretty well for this example here. Under Remove, I'm going to leave that as Lens Blur. Gaussian blur works pretty good. It looks very similar to lens blur. I always just find that lens blur looks just a little bit better. Motion blur is pretty much only useful if you know the angle of the blur that occurred in your photo. And typically I don't know that, so I tend to not use motion blur very often. So I'm just going to leave this as lens blur. And then finally, more accurate setting. Well, think of it this way. When do you want less accurate sharpening? So the more accurate setting may take a couple more seconds for the filter to render, but I think the results you get are worth those few seconds that you'll wait. So always click on more accurate for this one. Once I've done that, I'm going to click on OK. That's actually going to apply the sharpening to my photo. So now I've got 2 layers here. I've got my background layer, which is the original photo. I thought that looked pretty good. Now that I applied the sharpening, I see that looks even better. It really makes the clothing and the hair, really makes it pop off the screen. It gives it some nice, I guess pop is the word I'm looking for, but it really makes it look nice, really makes it look sharp. I can see the details there. One of the things I don't like, and I'm going to zoom in to 200%, you can really see it more, is the texture on the skin. Look at the before. Nice smooth skin, and then look at the after, and it really kind of introduced some texture to the skin, almost made it look like she has freckles. So let's take a look at the way that we can remove that. You can see it up here in the chest area too. Before, after. So that's what we're going to want to remove. I'm going to add a layer mask for this, so let's click on the Add Layer Mask button at the bottom of the Layers palette. It creates that layer mask on the layer. Now, if I click on the photo is active and I'll be painting on the photo. I don't want to do that. I want to paint on the layer mask. So I'm going to click on the layer mask. I'm going to go select my brush tool, change my foreground color to black. Notice the layer mask is white. There's no changes to this photo. If I paint on it with black, I'll start showing the photo underneath it, hence the soft skin color that's underneath it. So I'm going to paint with black on this layer mask. And let's just go over the skin here, and we'll just very quickly paint with black. The only thing I'm doing here is making sure I don't go over the edges, and that's because I'm doing this just for the skin tones. I like the way the skin looked in the original photo, but I like the way everything else looks in this photo. So I'm just going to paint over the skin areas here. Let's get the back of his neck there, and finally make sure we get over here. We'll get that ear too. Now if you ever realize you went too far, just switch your foreground color, just press the X key, switch your foreground color to white, and let's say I didn't want to show the ear, I didn't want to unsharpen the ear. I like the way the sharpened ear looks, so I can just paint over that with white, and that'll show the photo that's on top, the sharpened version of the photo again. So let's go ahead and zoom out here. Now let's take a look at our before photo. Looks good. Didn't really think we needed sharpening to it, but once we see that after photo, look at how the details in the hair and the dress really start to pop out off the photo here. So that's just a quick, easy way to do some creative and selective sharpening. And honestly, take a look at the Smart Sharpen filter even if you don't think your photo needs sharpening, because a lot of times just a small change will really make that photo look better.